Omar Samad, who joins us from Washington, D.C. He is a former Afghan ambassador to Canada, France, and Belgium. And we also have Viacheslav Matuzov, who is also a former Russian diplomat, who joins us from Moscow. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Matuzov, let me begin with you. Afghanistan is often referred to as being the USSR's Vietnam. Some analysts would even possibly say that it's one with even greater consequences for the Soviet Union because it contributed to the fall of the country. Would you agree?
No, I don't consider that we can compare Vietnam War and Russian operations in Afghanistan, because it's absolutely different situation, the political consequences and so on. I don't consider that Afghanistan played a great role for dissolving Soviet Union, because we have our own reasons, our own principles that brought the Soviet Union to collapse. It is a conspiracy of our command, of our leadership. Andropov, Gorbachev, and others, they considered to dissolve Soviet Union, to join our country to Western society with Western principles, with Western culture, and so on. I think that Afghanistan played, if it played very small role, not a big role in the national dissolution of Soviet Union.
Okay.
That's first.
Fair enough. Ambassador, I just want to get in Omar Samad in the conversation. Ambassador Samad, at the time, the Soviet military had far more superior weaponry, military stuff, when compared to the Afghan forces. What were some of the things that you think that made it a nightmare for them?
Well, first of all, let me just say that from an Afghan perspective, I think that Afghanistan did over time have elements of Vietnam. It emerged over time as the Afghan people rose up against the Soviet occupation, as the Soviets used all kinds of very heavy-handed tactics to subdue the Afghans, eventually lost many on all sides, mainly Afghans. At the same time, I think that, yes, Afghanistan was one element that contributed to the fall of the Soviet Union. There are many others as well, but it was one contributing factor. Getting back to your question, I think that the Afghan will to resist, the Afghan will to fight an aggressor was the main driving force against the Soviets. But then, of course, it became a geopolitical, a geostrategic game for many others. And Afghans needed help from the outside to fight the Soviets. Others eventually agreed and thought that this is a good war to fight against the Soviet Union. The cause was a good cause. The Afghan people were on board. Pakistan was playing a role in being sort of the front line against the Soviets. And eventually they gave billions of dollars of assistance, including arms, including the Stinger missile, which made a huge difference in the calculations of the war.
Okay. Ambassador Matuzov, what were some of the main lessons you think that the USSR walked away from this nearly decade-long military campaign?
Well, unfortunately, I was present during Russian-American negotiations in 1990, 1991, 92 even, till December 91. With the American State Department, with Mr. Robert Kimmett, who was Assistant Secretary of State, the United States. Secretary of State was, and we discussed the American military help, military equipment was sent from the United States to Afghanistan, Mujahedeen. So we consider that we fight not Afghanis, but we fight some Afghani proxy forces supported very heavily by the United States. And the result of these negotiations, we stayed in negotiations with State Department during 2 months. It was joint American-Russian declaration on Afghanistan. As a result of this declaration, it was undertaken the decision to withdraw Russian forces from Afghanistan. But I can say that all that things, when we left Afghanistan, Najibullah, who was the next president of the of Afghanistani president, stayed without any help. More than that, Yeltsin's government, Andrei Kozyrev as a foreign minister, and others, they prohibited any, not only military, but any civil aid to Najibullah. And Najibullah was stayed by alone, isolated from Russia, from other countries during 2 years. So I cannot say that all Afghani people was against Russia. And now I can, I know very well from our personnel in Afghanistan, they're not very enemized to Russia. And they, till now, they call us Shuravi. So I don't think that Russia can be compared not with Vietnam, even not with American presence, military presence today in Afghanistan.
Okay, Omar Samad, I'm going to ask the last question to you. Ambassador Matuzov mentioned that the Russian forces were fighting the Mujahedeen as the proxy forces. Is today's proxy force the Taliban right now?
Well, first of all, let me say that the Mujahideen of the 1980s and those who defeated the Soviets belong to the Afghan population. 1.5 million Afghans died in that war against the Soviets. About 6 or 7 million were forced out and they had to become refugees. That means the Afghan population overwhelmingly was anti-Soviet aggression, and that they paid a huge price for their sacrifices and for their independence. Comparing it to today, we have certain things that are happening that some people, revisionists and others, may look at as comparable. But what we're looking at is a different situation. But it could evolve into a where the Americans could get bogged down into something that may resemble the Soviet presence in Afghanistan if we make mistakes, if our calculations today are wrong, if we do not aim for an inclusive, broad-based peace settlement that includes all sides and aims to restore Afghan independence as well as Afghan sovereignty, and the will of the Afghan people be reflected in that. So what we have today is an opportunity to solve the problems that started back in 1978 and then 1979 when the Soviets invaded. We are still, unfortunately, facing the consequences and paying the price of a huge strategic blunder by the Soviet Union in 1978-79.
All right, gentlemen, I'm afraid I do have to leave it there. Ambassadors Omar Samad, Ambassador Viacheslav Matuzov, thank you very much for joining us here on the NewsHour. I do appreciate both sides of the argument and your analysis. Thank you.